You know, our community is like a hero. We have so much potential to do so many great things, but so often we stumble over ourselves. It's a hard thing to do. What we have going on right here in our upcoming election is, it's really simple. It's who do you trust? Who do you trust to make the best decisions for our community? You know, I'm a man of faith. And for Christians out there, over and over and over and over and over, God tells us, fear not. We just need to take him at our word and not be driven by fear. The idea that positive prevails is really what I want to address and come forward. So often we become fearful because there's negative Nancys that say, oh, this, and they point fingers and things happen, and they just sow distrust. And God simply says, fear not. And in order for our hero, our community, and allow the people who we have elected, we've not only got to allow them to make decisions that the majority of residents want to have made, but we also have to protect them. We have to step up as residents who are positive and start calling it like it is. So right now, in my opinion show, I get to just say, hey, look, let's talk about the positive stuff that these things that we're going to vote for tomorrow open the door for. And first of all, we're going to start with one of our city commissioners, and let's see what he has to say about 4 of the 7 propositions.
4 of the 7 are really cleanup issues. Our charter is an old document. It's been around. It's how our city was founded. We are a charter city. Maybe our charter is a little more detailed than it needs to be, as far as the charter should be big ideas. And so,
it should be a framework.
A framework, absolutely. A framework under which policies and all of our city codes and such fall under. And by being specific, it's allowed, as state and federal laws have changed, our charter hasn't necessarily changed to keep up with it.
And so 4 of the propositions are basically charter cleanup: streamlined bidding, city employee requirements, conflict of interest policies, and cemetery perpetual care. The other 3 are local issues, which wording needs changed to meet current resident wishes and to allow the better management moving into the future. The whole idea of local conspiracy is just really manipulative jabber. I mean, it's usually started by self-interested people on the inside of our community or on the outside of the community. And then it's perpetuated by people who choose not to overcome the awkwardness of just reaching out to our elected officials and talking to them. We have to understand that there's a lot of things that we don't understand. And we have to be okay in times of change that it's uncomfortable. But we have to be agreeable that we will have disagreements, and then we have to set down our own opinions so that we as a community can move forward. We need our city to be able to move forward. 4 of the proposition changes are really just cleaning up the charter for it to be a framework, and we'll talk about those 4. But the idea that if we change our charter, the people lose their voice, that is ludicrous, that is manipulative, and it is flat wrong. Let's talk or hear from our mayor, who we elected, about how things happen when ordinances or codes have to be changed.
Changing an ordinance is a much more nimble process, but every bit of that is done in an open meeting. We have no power whatsoever to do anything unless meeting in an open meeting there in front of everybody.
Okay, and that's a fact. For anybody, for 40 years, I mean, I could go back, I think, 6 mayors that I became friends with. The last 4 city managers I've become friends with, and it's simply because I talk to them. I treat them as people. So I want to throw up real quick just a banner of some people who are really trying really hard to do good things in our community. And so as we look at this banner, I mean, this is 7 people that we have elected that didn't all of a sudden become evil when they got elected. No, there are negative Nancys out there that like to throw darts, and they play a game of got you to be able to slow down what all 7 of these capable people, with all of the information that they get handed, try to make the best decisions for everybody in our community to move forward. Okay, so let's go down these 7 people and just what I know about these guys. First of all, let's go to Ward 1, and that's Commissioner Daniel Matthews. First of all, Daniel Matthews grew up here. His family is here. If you know Daniel Matthews, he's going to shoot you straight. He's a very intelligent man, runs one of the most important nonprofits in our community, and it's a selfless lifestyle that he has put himself into. And then he goes on top of that, and he volunteers to be on the city commission to make sound choices for us. Okay, let's go to Commissioner in Ward number 2. Ward number 2, Cammie Ingalls. Okay, Cammie's a hard person to know because she keeps to herself. She is very soft-spoken, very thoughtful about anything that she does. And the thing that she gets bashed for is because she has invested, I mean, literally, she has invested a whole bunch of money into our local area district that's been very hurting in order to create vision for what we have been screaming for since I've been involved for over 40 years. We want our downtown to prosper. This is a lady who has, again, put a lot of her own personal wealth on the line simply to help people. Now, if you know Cammie as well, she's a very trustworthy individual. She will do what's best for everyone around her, and then she will take the self-sacrifice of whatever the consequence is if it's against her own good. She believes that way. She's lived a lifestyle that way. She comes with a great background to be able to make decisions, and she has as much or more experience in trying to develop in our downtown district than anybody else in our community. Let's go on to number 3. That's Travis Flood. Travis Flood, for anybody, I mean, let's just take the last 60 days for an example. There is nobody who has worked harder to try to help more people in our community than Travis Flood. He considered running for this volunteer position for 2 terms prior to doing it because he saw that representation in the area in which he worked every day trying to help people, their voices were not really being heard. And just in the few years that he's been on the board, all of a sudden there has been a lot more input from a lot more people because Travis stepped out and said, hey, I'll run. And he wasn't running because he thought he was the smartest in the room. Travis was running because he thought, hey, if I run, I have insights that can help people. He's here to help. Let's go over to number 4. Number 4 is Rutherford, Darren Rutherford, who I would say is a friend. Darren, right around my age, he spent his whole life here. The last thing he wanted to do was run for city commission. And now he's been on the commission for, I think, close to 8 years, maybe even longer, because he understands how hard it is to get things done. He's come to a new understanding. And Darren Rutherford comes from a family that started their business here and continues to prosper their business here. And without Darren, we wouldn't have the mind of the next gentleman in Ward 5. And that is Mark Seahorn, who is one of the most successful self-made businessmen in our community. And that's because he puts his nose to work. He works, he understands what he does, he gets the facts, and he's a straight shooter. And Mark sells great products and takes care of his customers. He looks beyond himself, And the last thing he wants to be is a commissioner. But again, Mark Sehorn stays as a commissioner because he understands that, hey, if the people want me to do this, I'm going to do the best I can for them. And he is a proven businessman. And we move next to another local resident, Lauren Richter, who simply became involved because she wanted to give back to the community that she loves the most. Lauren is a teacher, she's a researcher, and she's somebody who is simply trying to serve to the best of her abilities for all of our community. And then that brings us to the mayor, Ed Bolt, who since he retired, he really plugged in downtown, opened a business downtown. Then he worked with all of the events that are going on downtown. He is a very respected businessman who spent 40 years as a national director of sales for one of the largest companies in our country. The man knows what he's doing. He's very capable. He understands the ins and the outs of getting things done, and his heart is for the community. He overwhelmingly won the mayoral election just a few years ago. And so when we look at these people, it comes down to something very easy. There are two sides. There's one which I believe is the huge majority of people who remain silent. And these are people who are positive and they understand what I just went through with the people who we have elected. The other is a small group who yell real loud, "I'm right and the city sucks." Well, I'm okay with the attitude of I'm right. If you want to be right as negative Nancy's, I'm fine with that. And I like to have discussions, but you don't have to always be yelling the city sucks because that's manipulative and it's just wrong. Flat out. The question we all must ask ourselves is, whose side are we on? I mean, who do you want to listen to? Do you want to listen to the people who we elected as trusted friends to advise us on what to do? Or do we listen to the negative Nancy's who are chipping at their feet every single time in which the 7 elected officials try to do something? It's okay that we don't agree with everything that they try to do, but we have to understand we elected them because we trusted them and they did not become conspirators of some evil plan simply because they got elected into office. And I, for one, say that currently we are abdicating our power for positive change to a small minority of disgruntled individuals. I believe in the people that we elected, and with that, we need to have conversations with them. And when I disagree with them, I just have to be open to consider what they're actually saying, because dialogue is great and that's how things get completed. We just must be agreeable to one another that we may end up in disagreement. So let's consider the propositions more clearly. And let's keep in mind, one of the changes is because the cart was put before the horse. A mistake, probably, maybe not. And then there's 2 other propositions that are trying to put the horse before the cart. And quite frankly, our elected officials are getting beat up on both sides of that. I mean, do you put the horse before the cart or do you put the cart before the horse? So proposition number 3, the cart was put before the horse. It clarifying start dates for newly elected mayor and commissioners. And this simply cleans up the charter, which is made to be a framing document, not a constitution, and it says that the elected official will go into office in the following meeting after the elections are verified. Pretty cut and dry. Now, one that's less cut and dry, and but it's depleting. It's a real easy one. It's proposition number 6, which is the lake. It has to do with the lake being in the charter. And it's deleting duplicity from the charter so future recommendations by residents can efficiently be acted upon by our elected officials. So very nicely, it was pointed out by a citizen that, hey, when you changed the dates for going from one city commission meeting from 2 city commission meetings to city commission, the dates did no longer line up as far as the sitting of a new elected commissioner. it's taken us, that was true, and it's taken us 6 months to be able to even come to this point in order to deal with that single issue. And after we change the wording, which I think will be changed, everybody's for the changing of the wording, it's still going to take up to another year for the governor's office to be able to approve that, because it's a change to our charter. It's a perfect example of why we need to make changes to our charter and our charter wording, and make sure that our charter is a framework and not doing the job of codes and ordinances, which are much more easily maneuvered with a lot of resident input, and it still takes time. But you don't have to go to a full electorate, which takes at least 6 months, and then you don't have a whole nother year in order for it to be enacted for a governor to be able to say stamp of approval. It's just interesting how we're facing these propositions, and we have both in front of us to consider, the cart being before the horse or the horse before the cart. Let's go ahead and put the horse before the cart so that our elected officials can go through due process and get things done that we want to see done. And then Proposition 1 is a very local issue as well, which is ward voting for their own representations. And everybody I talk to is for Proposition 1 for ward voting, and everybody that I know of and I've talked to is for Proposition 3, which is for clarifying the start dates. So let's go now to a touchier topic, which is the lake, and we're going to start that with our city manager, Andrea.
So all of this information now resides on the city code side, but we still have this very, very small remnant in the charter. And before we create a conflict, we would like to remove that language out of the charter, because it is really not constitutional material.
It is asinine to think that the commissioners can do anything and the voters are losing something in this vote for the lake. There has been a lake master plan under development with heavy resident input for years. And there's an advisory board set up with a lot of interested residents on the advisory board to advise on what residents truly want. The loud push against anything like this is simply trying to manipulate you as a voter to say that you will lose your voice. That's trash. It's just trash talk. And you shouldn't be manipulated by it. Nothing can happen in city government very fast. It is going to go very slowly. But what happens is, when you have it in charter language, it's elected officials who we have chosen to make the tough decisions for us, and they cannot do the things or get the things done that we want to see done as residents. And then it becomes very frustrating for the commission, because we as residents chew on them day in and day out, saying things are tied, and in our own ignorance as residents, we just don't understand the process. So, as residents, we have to understand that, number one, democracy, the way that we set it up was that we would elect officials who would make those decisions for us. And number two, we have to trust and talk with our elected officials on good days and bad. We have to make sure that they understand when we think they're doing good, just as much as we have to vocalize when we think they're doing bad. It is the residents, it's my responsibility to stop the gotcha tactics and the finger, because it makes our elected officials feel like they're alone up there. There is a vast majority of us who want to see positive change in our community, and we have to be loud and vocal for our elected officials and put the bullies at bay on the playground. Put them in their place, which is a small group that can do what they do. That's okay, as long as we, as a positive majority, support our elected officials. So those who are consistently pointing fingers and using gotcha tactics, I'm telling you flat out, are mostly say no than it is to take the lead, have people follow, and say, let's go. And we as residents, if we want to go to positive places, we fear not. Just like God says to me, just like God says hopefully to you. Fear not, over and over and over and over, because I believe positive will prevail. And so I'd like to hear one more time from our city manager right here. And it's about, again, changing the ordinances and, who we listen to.
If there were to be any future changes on the city codes, it would go to the city commission. It would have a public hearing. The public would be able to speak for or against, just like on any other ordinance change that is proposed.
Okay.
So the city commission cannot do this out.
In meetings for the city commission, things are always done in the open. Look, citizens do not lose their voice on this. Actually, residents gain the strength to be able to allow and empower the people that they have elected to actually fulfill the changes that we're all screaming for. I'm for Proposition 6. Now, let's go real quick. I'm going to go through the other ones pretty quickly for you because I like the idea that our city is trying to save money. That is something that has helped us here recently. Over a year, we've been trying to get our finances in order, and we're finally getting to a place that when we have a CATAD, we actually had some funding that could go and help our community. And so when we save money, that's a good thing. I understand that. Proposition number 2 is about competitive bidding. And I'd like to hear from our city manager as to how this is going to help us.
Sometimes bidders are not familiar because they are used to the state competitive bidding requirements. And so it creates an atmosphere where they may do something wrong, and we actually cut ourselves short on competitors. And as you know, competition makes better prices. We are trying to get in line with what the state is requiring, rather than adding yet another little layer of local rules and regulations on top of that.
This actually helps all of us. It even helps the local people who may want to bid on processes happening within our city. It's because when we come together with what the state already requires, the ones who are used to bidding, all they have to do is fill in their spreadsheet, and there's not something special that's going to disqualify them. I talked with a commissioner about this as well.
Like if we want to expand the pool of people to get better bids or lower bids or better services, they won't have to learn how to do our bidding process, because if our process is what the state's process is, they're used to the state's process, then they'd be more welcome in that case to come to us.
Proposition number 2, it's a no-brainer. It reduces disqualifications, it increases bidders' confidence, and it also decreases legal liabilities that can be very harmful to our entire community. Listen to our city manager.
The other thing, because it is not a universally understood requirement, because it is local, it could potentially result in litigation, which would cost the city and the taxpayer. And so we're trying to prevent those cases where that could happen.
Okay.
That is also the case for the requirements for the city employees.
Okay.
That charter language was written a long time ago. There is actually a state law that prescribes what municipalities with 5,000 residents or more can or cannot do, and we want to make sure that we align with that language rather than having our own.
Make no doubt about it, litigation is expensive, and when you have a door open for litigation, you don't want to be the one paying for it. And so when we align and we can more closely align ourselves with the state, it helps us because we can lean on them and the litigation that they've already serviced in the past. And when we start talking about employees and requirements for employees, that's a hotbed for litigation, number one. But number two, those rules are changing all the time from a federal level and from a state level. And for us to have to go back and actually try to change our charter in order to change those rules and regulations is really not a smart maneuver by our community. Both of those, I am for the changes to happen. And as we move forward, also the proposition for conflict of interest falls right into that same problem. Let's go ahead and hear from our city manager about our conflict of interest being open for attack.
If something was to happen and somebody would take us to court, us, the city,
Yes.
and by extension, taxpayer money,
Yeah.
we are more open to a potential attack,
Okay.
but really do not gain a benefit from having our own conflict of interest policies. So
Okay.
again, we are much better aligned with what the state has, because then there is this plethora of case law and case precedents that we can point to if somebody was to come in and challenge and say, you didn't do this right. We think you have a conflict of interest, and we can say, but state law says XYZ, and here's all the case law to back that up.
And so proposition number 2, streamlining the bidding. Proposition number 4, update requirements for city employees. And proposition number 5, aligning the conflict of interest policy. I'm definitely for. I think it's smart to do. And then we come to proposition number 7, which is updating policy for the cemetery's perpetual care. If you followed the city, again, our hero in this story trying to get things done, it's been a year, maybe 2 years now since we've heard of really the hard things that go on for families visiting their loved ones who have been placed in our cemeteries. We have to find funding in order to take care of our cemetery properly. And again, what has happened and what has hindered us is we have prescribing wording in our charter, which is our Constitution. And that has hindered us to be able to make the improvements at our cemetery that need to be made. So what the proposal is on the table is for us to be able to spend the money that is already in the bank to be able to take care and make the necessary improvements at our cemetery for our loved ones who deserve it. Now, the question has come up that says, well, how are we ever going to have money for our cemetery if we go spend all our money for our cemetery? We will have money for a beautiful cemetery, just like every other community with beautiful cemeteries has in the state. There are many different ways in which you can fund your cemetery in order to keep it beautiful. We are not going to create an issue in which we run out of money at the cemetery. We are in that issue currently because we can't spend the money that we have. We have to untie the hands of our elected officials and our staff to be able to make proper determinations like this one, to be able to say, hey, we need to be able to spend this money in order to take care of those in our cemeteries. In conclusion, guys, so I'm for proposition number 7 as well. It comes back to, would you like our city, our hero, to actively try to get better? Or do you choose to sit back, throw darts, and continue the stagnation that has plagued our community for a long, long time? I, for one, believe the large majority of us, and me included, want to see our community move forward. And we, as residents, must take the responsibility to back our elected officials vocally and do that in times of good as well as in times of bad.